almost felt like boring. Like I was expecting that same rush that I felt with my third, and this was like kind of boring.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth, rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share homebirth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year. From the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall of Rooted in Eden Private Contract Association,
and me, holistic doula and birthkeeper Brooke Collier of Sister Birth.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all your decisions unto the Lord.
And to reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has already called good.
Please remember, birth is not a medical event, but a natural process. We are not your care providers, and this should not be taken as medical advice.
Hello! It's going to be another birth storytelling today. This episode is going to be a little bit long, but I think you will also find it very much worth the time to listen to it. So I have Jalina joining me today, and she's going to tell us 4 birth stories. And the first 3 are hospital births, but they all serve to kind of tell the progression that led her to ultimately having a free birth last year. And I think you'll find there's so many nuggets of goodness embedded in her stories and her process around those stories. Her story also includes threads of infertility and miscarriage that she's very open about sharing as well. So she really covers the whole gamut. So I hope you can find a cozy way to settle in and give this episode a listen. And if you have to do it in 2 chunks, that's very understandable, but it will be worth your time. As we dive into today's birth story, just a reminder that the choices and beliefs of the mamas sharing their stories here are as individual and varied as the storyteller herself, and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or recommended actions of Lauren and or Brooke. Jalina, thank you so much for jumping on this podcast with me. I'm so glad to have you here. How are you?
Yes, I'm well. I got to sleep last night, so it was my turn to sleep. So I'm ready to go.
Great, me too. So I already know a bit about your stories, but we wanted to start with, you did not start off an out-of-hospital birther or home birther. You started off in hospital, and so you've had 3 in that context.
No.
So since this podcast is mostly focused on home birth stories, we're going to spend the most time on that story. But I definitely still want to hear a little bit of the background information about your journey into motherhood and those first 3 births and what they kind of taught you or showed you. So why don't you start there?
Yeah. My goodness, my journey into motherhood was its own podcast or an entire book. But to sum it up, we tried for 3 years for our firstborn, and in that time we had miscarriage of our first pregnancy. And that was something that was just like total devastation. I was just like on my knees. I wasn't even a Christ follower at the time, and I just was like, the Bible helps other people, so maybe it'll help me. So I Googled Bible verses for miscarriage, and I came across one that was quite helpful, Romans 8:18, which I have tattooed on my arm, and just read through that until I could like find my breath again. And in the meantime, my husband filed for divorce, and I called his bluff, and so we've been married almost 11 years now. That was it was shortly before our 4-year anniversary. So it was just, it was devastating, and it was also a time where Christ found me, and I'm now a faithful follower of Him, and as is my husband, and as is our firstborn son, as of last year was 4. So praise the Lord on that. And so finally conceived my firstborn, we had looked into like ways to improve our fertility naturally, and so we cut out all these toxins. We switched to whole food eating, and now looking back, we see, when you step into God's design for your body and the way that it works with the earth, you see good things happen, and just as He designed. And so we did those things, and then shortly after that, we conceived our firstborn, and it was really hard to go through that pregnancy. And I just was like, I wanted to apply this like non-toxic, like holistic, natural, hands-off sort of approach to his birth and my parenting with him. And so one thing that was really important to me was breastfeeding. That was like my end goal was I want to breastfeed for at least a year. And so everything that led to that point was what I was after. So I hoped for an unmedicated birth with him. And I can't even say I prepared for one. Now, seeing what I did for my other ones that were unmedicated, I did not prepare, and I didn't know.
Well, it's kind of funny how the first time you're trying to have a natural birth, it's almost inevitable that you'll look back at it and think, wow, I really wasn't that prepared for that. You think you are at the time.
Right. And like, how do I know? Like, I didn't have an understanding at the time of what it takes to support a woman and to be supported and to have like a sacred space. And I just thought, like, I kind of had this, women before me have done it,
I'll figure it
out kind of thing. But women before me had support who had an understanding of physiological birth, which I did not have.
Yeah,
I think that key aspect for sure. And yeah, exactly. So I actually had mentioned home birth, like in passing, because that was just something that kind of fit within my holistic, like hand drop kind of mentality. And my husband gave a typical answer. I'm not comfortable with that, and I didn't know enough about home birth to push for it. So I was like, okay. So I found I did all this research to find this wonderful OB. I really liked him. He was just like very compassionate. He had his own practice, so it was like just him. And so anyway, I had OB care with him. I had OB care also with my second born because I just it's what I did with my firstborn, and I didn't notice at the time anything that was like a huge turn off. So I just kind of did what I did. With my firstborn onto my second, who also we had a miscarriage before him. So it's just been a mess getting into that.
You have been through a lot in terms of fertility in general, and then holding pregnancies. You've experienced both sides of that, like trouble getting pregnant and then losing, and that's a pretty significant part of your story. You probably never had a completely easy breezy pregnancy where you were just like fear and
just complete whatever naivete. Yeah, no naivete, no ignorant bliss, or not ignorant, but just like untouched and pure. And I'm like kind of breezing it over it now, but I have plenty of sources of like what it's been like, where I've shared what it's been like to go through that. And it's definitely like, if anyone's listening and whether or not you've had a miscarriage, you're like, oh yeah, she's just like breezing over it. It was like, I'm kind of on the verge of tears as I'm like saying some of these things, but it's just a fact of my life at this point, and I'm in a different season where I can't decide if I'm just like so traumatized I don't like to think about it, or if I feel so much that I don't need to think about it. But I just don't think about it so much anymore. I did have a day recently. It was actually the anniversary of my first miscarriage. I went to bed and I just felt like I hadn't even realized the date. I just felt so empty and like alone, even though my husband had been sleeping. Husband and I have been sleeping in shifts the past like 6 months with my fourth son. And I just felt like so empty, and I'm like, I feel like I need to hold something. And then I realized the date, and I dug up my teddy bear that I got after one of my miscarriages, and I slept with the teddy bear. So yeah, it pops up for sure. And it definitely informs like how I approach my physical health, my mental health, my parenting style. Because with my parenting, I'm like, I need to discipline these kids, but I wanted them so badly, I don't want to yell at them. So where do I
that's
meet
real.
in the middle here?
I feel like
So,
well, two things.
So
One is, if you
don't-
said you have other places where you've talked more in depth about your infertility and miscarriage stuff, I would love to be able to put links to those things in the show notes if that's possible.
Mhm.
But I also just wanted to say, I think I've heard a lot of moms who have gone through infertility and recurrent miscarriages talk about that almost a guilt they feel over having a hard time parenting, because it's like, I waited so long for this. I know how valuable this is. It was so hard to get here. How dare I have negative feelings towards these children, right?
Right. And then there's like, this is what you asked for, which I never, it was like, I've internalized that. I've seen that message. I've never actually had anybody tell me that, but then I've also never been like, oh, this is so hard, because I just tell myself, like, this is what you wanted and you knew. Like, I think a lot of women, they kind of go into parenthood with some naivete and like not understanding what all goes into it, and like they think it's going to be fun or cute or like a milestone or whatever. I definitely, like, my sister's 10 years younger than me. My mom was a drug addict, and so I had an understanding going into it of what parenting entailed, more than I think most people at my age at the time. But I still got this like, oh man, this is hard, and like, this is what you asked for. You knew what you were getting into. And so I didn't have a lot of support postpartum with either of them. I didn't seek a lot of support, and I definitely have found a nice balance of the gentle parenting and parenting as God parents us. And I get to understand that better now as a mother, of like, what does God do in the situation? And, he talks to us and he welcomes us back and he asks us to repent and he forgives us. And just like myself being humble and being an example, and not like, I'm his mother on this earth, but ultimately I'm a sister in Christ with my children. And so just taking that mentality and being humble and still understanding that discipline, and teaching and guiding and setting an example and not punishing.
I love that. That's so beautifully said.
That's definitely a big part of my motherhood, which is like unspoken as I'm like talking and stuff, but it's just integral in my life now, and so it's not something I ever like even think to.
I love that. I'm so glad you shared that. Didn't expect we'd get into gentle parenting, but that was a really beautiful side note. Yeah, and such a beautiful legacy of what you've been through. That it's even because of the hard things you went through. Your marriage hit a crisis point, but then also God found you. And because of the hard things you went through, it shaped you and the way that you mother. And that's really, like, those are redemption stories, and that's really good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I think
I call infertility the best struggle I never chose.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah. So should we look back to your births? I think we were somewhere between 2 and 3.
Yeah. So my first. Yeah. So my first two, they're very similar. The big difference was one of them I had the private practice, and the other one I got, we had moved, and it was one where they switched you around. And the one that I ended up at my birth was the one that I liked the least, of course, but you have no say over that. So they were both long. They were 36 and 42 hours. They both were in the hospital. Both of them I just hadn't prepared. I didn't really have an understanding of physiological birth. I wanted both of them to be unmedicated, and both of them I had this rectal contractions, which is a whole other thing. If anyone has heard of that or experienced that and you need support in that, then come find me, because I had to work through that with my my last two births. But my second birth, I was threatened by a C-section for no other reason other than I had been there a long time. and I don't really remember much of like his birth and the early postpartum, and I feel like those are definitely connected. And both of them, I ended up getting the epidural, and for the epidural, I had to like sit very still, and so I would have these contractions coming on. It was at a point where like I was having these strong contractions. I had to sit very still, and I managed to do that because I didn't want to like get paralyzed or have something go wrong there. So I like stayed very still. And then by the time the epidural was in, I was like, oh, I could have just done that. And then like gotten through the contractions, but it was too late at that point. And so I had with the epidural, I didn't feel anything. I guess like most women feel like either it doesn't work or like on half of their body they can feel something, or at the very least they feel some sort of pressure, and I felt nothing. Not a thing. Not nothing. I could like look at the contraction monitor and be like, I can't believe I'm having contraction because I feel nothing unless I could like touch my belly and it would harden. And actually, it so happens that with even my unmedicated births, I don't feel contractions.
That's very
in my
unique
belly at all. So
yeah.
they were. I know it's very weird. I feel it like only with my first 3 in my rectum, and then like that in my cervix, just like that downward pressure in my cervix. So, I don't know. I feel like I'd rather have it in my belly. It would be less intense, but so I didn't feel anything, and with the epidurals, and both teams, 2 different hospitals in 2 different states, didn't comprehend that I couldn't feel anything, and so they would be like, okay, you need to push a few times on this contraction. The goal was like 3 or 4 times per contraction, and the idea is once the peak got there that I would push 3 times. And they coached me through like the purple pushing. I felt like all this pressure in my face. I actually got like the red the petechiae, the red like sprinkles on my face with my firstborn. And so it got to the point where my husband was like reading the contraction monitor for me, and he was telling me when to push, because the hospital team kept asking, do you feel that one? Did you feel that one? Did you feel that one? And I'm like, no, I don't. Like, I don't know what other words to tell you other than I don't feel anything. And so he was the one who was coaching me through the pushing, which if you like watch hospital births on like if you ever watched a baby story or watched shows like recreated in any way, it's the hospital team that's telling you when to push. Right. Yeah, I thought I was so important because I had watched those growing up, and I wasn't that important. Actually, as it turns out, I was just kind of brainwashed. I guess this is what I feel like now. And so my husband ended up being the one that told me when to push. And then like there was no support before. There was no like support in like working through contractions, which I was expecting. If I put in my plan that I wanted a medicated birth, I was expecting support for that, and not that my husband and I will have to do that aspect on our own, and then they were just kind of like monitoring us, which was not helpful.
I do think that's, I mean, like, I've attended a lot of hospital births, and that's kind of the norm. It's like, they kind of leave you alone to do your own thing until you're pushing, and then they get really bossy. Now we're going to tell you exactly how to push. Get in this position.
Oh, yeah.
Count, hold your breath, push, catch your breath, push again.
They did that for my third. Yeah. Which, and I had in my mind, I already knew, like, this concept of laboring down. For both of them, I would get to like 9.5 centimeters, and they were like, let's just push this out of the way. And I don't know if that was them being impatient or if it was a cervical lip or both. But I had this concept of laboring down, and I had this concept of, what's the other thing? Like not holding your breath, of like breathing your baby out. But I didn't know enough to like push for it, and I also it's very hard in that circumstance to like advocate for yourself. I can do that like a little bit better at appointments and stuff, but as far as like being there like on your back with your legs open and all these people surrounding you telling you to do, I just completely lose my voice. And I think that happens to a lot of moms. Like no matter how strong you are going into it, birth is a different thing. You have like all these hormones. You have these like your brain shifts priorities from like the thinking and the arguing and the making logical decisions to like the emotional and like protecting your baby and trying to like birth the baby
Yeah,
and
I'm so glad you
breastfeed
brought
and
that
that
up.
sort of thing. So you just don't know how it's going to be until you
And
go
you're
into
almost
it.
caught up in the current, I think, in the hospital system of there's all these people moving in this direction, and again, because your brain isn't in advocacy, critical thinking mode, you just kind of get swept up in the current of what's happening. And then it's only afterwards when you get out of the river that you're like, what just happened? I don't think that's what I meant to do.
Right, yeah, I had like, yeah, and I'm a people pleaser to begin with. Well, I'm a recovering people pleaser to begin with, and so yeah, I just did what they told me, and I just like I could be in the moment. Like with my third, kind of a similar thing ended up happening, and I'm like, I could see at that moment, why are you doing what they're telling you to do? But I just you're not in the same
you're not,
brain
and it's
space.
meant to be that way. That's purposeful, but when it's not being honored and respected, and it can be really damaging and really interruptive at very least. Yeah. So.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So those were kind of my first two, very similar, and my third ended up being my first unmedicated birth, which was very exciting. So so I had this like realization, like, okay, I need to prepare spiritually and emotionally and like mentally more than I need to prepare physically. And that's like my number one advice to first time moms is prepare mentally more than you prepare physically. So yeah, so I learned about this, like, what are these rectal contractions? Why do I have them? How can I mitigate them? I had all these techniques for that. I had like a journal where I wrote my prayers, my prayer requests, and my favorite Bible verses and stuff. I was like in the Word all the time. Holy Spirit would wake me up in the middle of the night and like direct me toward a passage, and I would go read it, and I'd be like, oh, this is like totally speaking to me. And that's actually how we got his name, which was really fun. Like we had a different name picked out before, but Holy Spirit had led me to this reading for that. And yeah, so I just was like very connected. And I kept having this vision of like, I had watched Passion of the Christ, and I kept thinking of Jesus, like with the crown of thorns and carrying the cross and just like beaten down and bloody and weak and just carrying on. And I was like, if Jesus can do that for me, then I can go through this feeling of power for my baby.
Yeah, what a beautiful truth to carry with you.
Yeah. I'm glad I watched that, actually, that movie a long time ago. It really gave me like that visual that helped me. And so he was 13 minutes from being born in the car. His labor, I had gone from 42 hours with my second down to 3 hours with my third. And I had just really mastered, oh yeah. Yeah, so when people ask about that, I'm like, oh yeah, it's possible. Be ready. And then they say the third is a wild card, but then it kind of happened with my fourth too. So I had mastered the art of surrender, and I think as a Christian it's easier to understand that concept and to kind of manifest it, because I was just like relaxing my body and like constant prayer. Like my whole labor was a 3-hour long prayer essentially. And so we get to the hospital, we're driving 80 miles an hour. Well, my husband, I was like on my knees, unbuckled, turn around backwards. Very unsafe. Not like they say hospital birth is safer. This was not safer than just staying home. And get out at the hospital to the end of 5 guns from police staged around our vehicle, which my husband told me about.
They had
later.
started following you during your drive, right? Trying to get to pull him over, essentially.
Yeah, I was riding backwards, and so I saw the lights, but I wasn't thinking. And my husband was like, "Turn around," and I'm like, "Oh, duh, yeah, that makes sense. If they see us, they don't want to see me riding backwards." So praise for the time that this baby came, because the lights that are usually red, there's like, you get off the exit and there's 3 or 4 stoplights to even get to the hospital. They were yellow instead of red. So he just flew through them, and he had his blinkers on, and he had his window rolled down. He was like pointing to the hospital, like, we're going to the hospital. And I could hear the sirens, and yeah, so we got there, and I got out, and this police officer came around. He was trying to escort me, but the contractions were just like one on top of the other. So I had to work through a couple contractions before I was able to even like accept his help to walk into the building. And then there was just like a front desk guy in there, and the police officer left me, and I was like, my husband was being held up because he had talked to the police. So I was like in there, like contractions one on top of the other, like I need to go pee, which is what I feel when the baby's almost born. I don't feel like I have to poop, I feel like I have to pee. So yeah, I did that a couple times, and I had some people finally bring a wheelchair and like try to put me into the emergency room. Like, I think you're giving birth in the emergency room, and I'm like, no, show me where the maternity ward is. And I'm walking and I'm leading the way, like as I'm having contractions, and they're like, oh, how far apart are your contractions? Like, you can hear. Why don't you time them for me? Just like complete chaos. Like, I don't understand why. Like, why am I being told to come to the hospital when
I think they've lost the art form of watching a woman to figure out how labor is progressing, because they're so reliant on the technology, right? Like, if my technology is not here to tell me what's going on inside this woman's body,
oh my gosh,
I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
they've just lost that, like, using one's senses to assess.
Well, so yeah, these were men, and they were working. They were like ER workers, and so I'm like, I'm not gonna give birth with you in the ER. And I could see into the ER, and I saw it was just curtains, and I'm like, no, show me to the maternity ward. I'm like, is it this way? Is it this way? Like, leave. Is it this way? Tell me where. And he would not show me because he wanted to get me into the bed. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I want to go to the maternity ward. So now he's like wasting time, right? And so finally he gets me in the wheelchair, and I'm sitting on my knees because that's my preferred like labor position. And he wouldn't push the chair. And my husband's like, just go. So finally he picked up the pace and got me up there. And we get up there, and they're like, we're going to check you in. And like, as I'm having a contraction, and they're like, okay, why don't we just get you into this room? So they didn't know my name. I didn't know their names. I hadn't seen their faces. I had to pee again, even though I just had done that a few minutes ago. And then I got into the bed. I'm like on my hands, and I'm on my knees with my hands around the bed. And there's all these people behind me. They're like checking my cervix, which I didn't know their names. I didn't know their faces. And they were just took it upon themselves to like put body parts up my body while a human's trying to come out. So basic. Oh yeah, it was. I became more upset after my 4th birth.
Yeah,
that had happened with my 3rd birth, and blood pressure cuff going on me. Like, just none of this with my permission. I still don't know any of their names of anybody that was there. Like, over 2 years later, 2.5 years later, and they were like telling me, they were trying to get me to blow up a balloon or something. Like, I did not understand what they were saying at all. So finally, my husband was like, look at me. And he locked eyes with me, and I remember noticing the color of his eyes. And he's like, I want you to blow onto my hand. And he put his hand in front of me, and I blew on his hand. And that's like, that's what they were trying to get me to do. But that kind of helped me catch my breath. And my throat was so dry from like vocalizing through the contractions, and I was thirsty, but I didn't have enough time between contractions to take a drink. It was like really intense. So that kind of like slowed things down a little bit. And then they forced me onto my back, and I was like, I don't want to get on my back. I don't want to. I don't like this. And they're like, oh yeah, it's for the baby. So now, of course, you hit the mother where it counts, you know. So I got on my back, and then they're telling me, like, at this point, I'm having fetal ejection reflex. There's like 10 people in the room. I think they got freaked out because I was so loud. Like, they hadn't ever seen a physiological birth or something. And like the NICU was in there and stuff. And I'm like, it's a baby coming out. Like, what do you expect? So, yeah. So then they started telling me how to push. Like, hold your breath. And so I couldn't argue with them. And like I was having fetal ejection reflex, and this vocalization was my pain, my pain relief was this vocalization. And they're trying to tell me to not do that. And it just felt so unnatural. Like I felt like I was with the vocalization, I was getting like the right muscles involved to like support the fetal ejection reflex, and they're telling me to hold my breath. So now I'm taking pressure away from like what's happening down there up, and it's going up to into my face. And so what I had to do was I had to silence myself and pretend that I was holding my breath so that they would leave me alone about that, and I could continue allowing my body to do what it was already doing.
It's like trying to reason with an ancient primal reflex. Doesn't really work. Here, fetal ejection reflex. Let me tell you.
Right, exactly. I didn't want to. I was like, this is working. Right. Well, with my first two, I was like, like I said, I'm like recovering people pleaser. I didn't want anyone else. I didn't want to disturb anybody else. So that was actually a factor in me getting the epidural, was because I didn't want to get into like loud vocalizations. And so before I got to that point, I opted for the epidural. And so this time I was like, wow, this works and this helps. And they're trying to like cut that off. And I'm like, no. Like this has been working up and for these past hours, and now you come in here like the heroes and you're telling me to do it some other way. No, I'm not gonna do that.
Such a high drama birth.
Yeah, so he was,
you can almost feel the adrenaline in the story.
Yes,
like it's just like adrenaline, which honestly makes it quite impressive that your body finished that birth as efficiently as it did. Because adrenaline can be a bit of an enemy of the birth hormones, and yet, in spite of all that adrenaline surrounding you, your body still finished that birth so smoothly and quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I pretty much labored in the car. So I think by the time I got there, I was so far along that there was no stopping it. I think his personality is like just so go as well that he's like, okay, I'm ready, here I come. He's like still that way, just like barricaded through me. So I had my first unmedicated birth, and I felt so connected with him, and I felt this like rush of bonding hormones that I had felt before had been numbed. But now I have the confirmation that like, wow, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I'm so in love. Like I feel so good. I had this like rush of like hormones and adrenaline, like the adrenaline added to it and stuff. And like I wrote out his whole birth story and I shared it. I actually have the whole thing typed out on my website, which I'll share later. So if you want to know more about the police chase, which is we will definitely link to that. It's all typed out. And so, I just like my postpartum period with him was better. I'm like still to this day so bonded in a way that I just didn't with my first two. That like has to be more intentional on my end.
And can I ask, does that bring up, has that brought up a little bit of grief for you? Like once you tasted what it could be like, did you have some retroactive grief and loss feelings about what happened with your first two?
I think it was more like, what do I want to say? Like confirmation, which it wasn't like a negative feeling for me. I did have like feelings of comparison, but it wasn't something that it was like an I wonder. But I had, with my first birth, I had such a positive experience. Like I had finally become a mother after all these years, and I was like, I just felt like I was in this bubble with my baby, and we were a family of 3, and ultimately I felt like it was a baby-friendly hospital, so it was one where like all the nurses are trained in breastfeeding, so they were all helpful. You're like encouraged to have the baby sleep with you on your chest rather than putting them in the bassinet. So the hospital in general, my experience was that they really encouraged bonding. And I knew that some moms took longer to bond with their babies than others, so I just kind of chalked it up to that at that time. And so it's more like I just wonder what it would have been like if I had had an unmedicated birth with him. But
Yeah,
just like doing the
that
best
makes
with what I
sense.
could at the time,
That's good. So now you had tasted through that third birth how the lack of drugs and the less interruptions to your postpartum, like how that made such a difference. Is that kind of what ended up propelling you into thinking about maybe approaching your fourth birth in a different way? Tell us how you got from I'm still going to the hospital, but I'm going to have a natural birth there to I'm not going to go to the hospital.
Wow. Yeah, it's multifaceted, but the first thing that comes to my mind is that I had in my mind for my third birth that I could it's coming up for me right now, by the way. I had 3 miscarriages before him. So it was like just like a hallelujah moment to like have this baby.
Yeah.
And he's my little praise baby. And um I had some experience at that time with how the miscarriage care or lack thereof and that sort of thing. And I theirs is the best hospital, like that's the best hospital available to me in my area, but it's still over an hour away. And I didn't care for like their care through the miscarriage, through any miscarriages, or like they're kind of, let's put a band-aid and medicate you rather than like what is the root cause here. So my with my third birth, let's see. Well, hang on. What was your
just
question
kind of
again?
how you got from like having a natural birth but still doing it at the hospital to deciding to not go to the hospital with your fourth.
Okay, yes. So I had in my mind, like, I wanted to free birth. Like, I had this concept because when I started getting into, like, searching natural birth or unmedicated birth, this free birth kept coming up, and I kept following pages, and I'm like, okay, this is what it is to have an undisturbed birth. And the best way that that could happen was, like, it was most likely to happen when you just didn't have anybody there to try and, like, put their fears or, their previous experiences or whatever upon you. So I had it in my mind, like, I wanted a free birth, but in the hospital. Like, I'm in the room, I'm by myself with my husband because he's the only one that I've needed up until this point. And I'm you guys are in the hallway, and if we need you, we'll let you know. Like, you're there for emergencies, which I thought that's what it was for. What if something goes wrong, right? This like general blanket statement. What if something goes wrong? Um, so that was one big factor was like I realized with my third birth that free birth is not a thing. Like, it's not possible because they're trying to like prevent life on their end. And if they, leave you in the room on your own and then like the baby falls out on its head or something, that's on them. That falls down on them, or in their mind, that's what the case would be. So I realized in that moment that I wasn't going to get this undisturbed birth that I had envisioned, and I was like, if I'm only there for 13 minutes and they can do the number of things that they did in that time, like, it's just not going to happen. And then with the precipitous labor as well, like I labored entirely in the car, and I did not want to like making that drive. And then just like I had worked in the hospital myself. I worked at a trauma center and, gone to school for being an x-ray tech and everything. So I just had like a deep knowledge and appreciation for informed consent and patient care. And so I'm very picky about the care that I receive. And when I saw that wasn't matching up, like the best care available to me wasn't anywhere near what I was looking for. There was like a lot of coercion through my pregnancy as well, and like withholding of information, withholding of options that I knew were options. I just didn't want to mess with it. And then like I'm in New York State, and so he was born at the beginning of March 2020. And so like this back and forth of like what's allowed and what's not allowed and whatever. I was
that was a crazy time to be having a baby. Like, talk about so many ever-changing external circumstances and the fear that was just in the water for everyone at that time. Like, it's you had your baby at a critical, difficult point in our recent history as a country.
Yeah, like I was anxious enough about like what are the restrictions for the appointments, like let alone having to deal with what are the restrictions going to be. I already felt so restricted in the best case. Like it came when things were just kind of starting to get weird. They were asking like, do you have a fever before my appointment? And like the rest of the hospital had different restrictions of the maternity ward and stuff. So it was like just getting weird. Thankfully, because I don't think I would have done well if it had been like later that month. So then when I was pregnant, still, I know everything was dragging on through 2021. I was like, I'm not gonna mess with that. And then the way that the care system is in my area, it's like all or nothing. Like you either go to all of the appointments and give birth at the hospital, or you do nothing. You can't, if you go in for like just the 20-week ultrasound, or you don't have any prenatal care and then go in just for the birth, it's a huge red flag for them. This area is like not friendly toward home birth, home, school, home, anything. And so I had to be very careful with, about how or if I sought hospital care at all through my pregnancy.
Because it sounds like in the way things are set up where you are, especially to even try to dip your toe in or kind of go in to get one thing and then come back out, it doesn't really work. Is that what I'm hearing? Like all or nothing. And if you show your face in there, then you're kind of on their radar. And okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I there's no home birth midwives here.
Wow.
3.5 hours is the nearest one in my state, but I live on a state line, and so the closest midwives are actually across the bridge, and they're not allowed to hop the bridge over here because of the restrictions that are here.
That makes it really hard. So that also contributed to you.
So there was a lot of
jump, because a lot of people do like the hospital birth, natural, and then home birth with midwife, and then an unassisted birth. But in your case, that middle part of it, like that middle stepping stone, was not really even an option,
right?
Because the home birth midwife were an option.
Right, and I had looked into home birth with my third as well, but it wasn't an option. The only option we had were midwives within the hospital. And so I did receive midwifery care, or at least a hospitalized version of midwifery care with my third, because that was the closest that was available to what I wanted. And then when that wasn't what I was expecting it to be, I was like, that's like, I've exhausted my options here. It's not safe for me to travel, given my birth history and how far away it is, and just like all the other factors. I was like, I'm not even going to mess with it. I'd rather prepare to give birth unassisted. And it was a struggle. It was a back and forth of like, okay, I'm really, really trying. Like, maybe, I'm asking around. Maybe I'm not finding somebody online, but she exists elsewhere. Or, maybe I'll hire someone to come live here or whatever. Like, there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of searching and a lot of like internal battle. And then once I made that decision, I'm going to free birth, there was so much relief. Like, I feel it already rushing over my body right now as I say it. There was so much relief and peace, and like, okay, this makes sense to prepare for free birth, whether or not we eventually find someone to attend our birth. It makes sense given my history. It would be, in my opinion, in my case, irresponsible to not prepare for a free birth. And then once I got into preparing for a free birth, it was like, well, I'm prepared now.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. I can feel that relief, like, because I've been in that place so many times where you're going back and forth in your head, trying to work things out, figure things out, straddling, both sides of the fence, and then finally committing is such a relief. And I think I always feel really great about women who choose free birth with that much peace, as you described, like, not like I guess I don't know what else to do, and I'm scared of the alternative, so this is my next best thing. But when that peace settles in, that always feels like something from the Lord for me. That's like, he's like blessing and affirming, like, this is the path I have for you this time. And I'm so glad you got to have that peace.
And when I see how my fourth birth went and I look back, I'm like, okay, thank you, God, for leading me to free birth. And I think that battle was like, it was the father putting in my mind free birth, like this is what I have for you and this is what you're gonna need to do, and me fighting against it. Like, no, that's a hassle, that looks bad to other people, like whatever my insecurities were there. And so I remember learning like that's one way you can tell if an idea is from the father or from you, if like that's not really what you want to do. So I think I was fighting it because like it wasn't necessarily originally my idea and like an option that I came up with on my own. It was just what I had been listening to the father.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your internal process on that, because I don't think we often get the opportunity to see what goes on behind the scenes, so to speak, when people choose rebirth, and that internal process that has to happen, and all the questions and what ifs you have to face, and the wrestling sometimes. And I think it's really good to be honest about that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like, right. I think it's like there's this stigma of like free birthers are generally like drug addicts who don't feel like going to the hospital, kind of like generally speaking. And it's just so the opposite. It's like we care so much and we have such a deep knowledge that this we felt like was the best option for our baby and our family all around. And I'm sure there's a few who have like they couldn't feel that labor was coming on because they were under the influence of something, but I'm sure that's like tiny percent. Vast majority that I've seen is like I care about my baby and I care about my health and like how those two coexist because the mother's health is so important to the baby. You have to take care of what their needs are as well. That like those are the people who choose free birth, and like it's a painstaking decision for most. It's not like something we take lightly. It's not something we just like decide we're gonna just see how it goes. Like there's a lot of preparation that goes into it.
Well said. So once you made that decision and the peace rushed in, did you also have a wild pregnancy? Meaning, and in case any listeners don't know what I mean by that, a wild pregnancy just means there was no prenatal care from a medical professional.
Yeah, I had to. I what I've read from other moms is that in other states you can decide like I'm just gonna go get the 20-week, or like I'm just gonna go do like 36 to check the baby's placenta or whatever, and like you in your words, once you dip into your toe into the system, you're on their radar. So I actually played around with getting a 20-week ultrasound, like an elective ultrasound, but there's not really any. There's one elective ultrasound tech here, and she's actually not trained as an ultrasound tech. So where I've been to elective ultrasounds before, and they'll still like check out your placenta because they've had training and experience. She doesn't know how to do any of that, so I'm like, there's just really not any point in trying to. I'm not really getting any information or value in doing that, and so again, like it was something where I wanted a little bit of support. I wanted a little bit of somebody who knows my situation, who's on my side, who's aware of my situation, who's like maybe more medically trained. But I felt like I could not partner with the medical model in any way, else I was like endangering my family. So yes, I had a wild pregnancy, a self-directed pregnancy, and I'm still about charts and graphs and recording and stuff. So I still did my heart rate and my weight and my blood sugar. I had opted for my third baby to do the blood sugar testing at home, and so I still had all the equipment for that. And I wrote down like what my symptoms were, emotionally how I was doing, my fundal height, like nothing that I felt like was completely necessary, but I enjoy those numbers. I enjoy looking at that sort of thing. And I kept them in a book, and my plan, because of the way that New York is and like how I knew I would be under scrutiny if I had to do a hospital transfer or anything, was I just kept all that in a book, and I put on the back an emergency transfer sheet with my blood type, my emergency contacts, my date of birth, preferred hospitals, like all that sort of information, so that they could quickly reference it, and then they could see all in one place. Okay, this woman is like actually taking responsibility, and she's not just not getting care. She is caring for herself. So I had to kind of cover my butt in that way. And then I had a chiropractor who was really super awesome and supportive. And yeah, I'll sign a proof of pregnancy or I'll do whatever you need. So I was getting like care in that sense as well.
You were so thorough in your ways of doing your prenatal care. Not every wild pregnancy, I would say, is as like numbers oriented and doing that like such a disciplined kind of assessment of how your pregnancy is progressing as you were. So I think personality comes out here a little bit too, doesn't it? As well as the forethought that you knew that being able to present certain kind of records or information or data to the hospital if you did end up needing to transfer might kind of pave the way for you to have a less kind of hostile, upsetting situation. So yeah, thanks for sharing about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a good time to mention, yes, I think it's a good time to mention that you were a virtual doula for me, and you were someone that I could consult and like a middle ground of like in between. I'm all by myself, and then there's a hospital. Like if something goes, if I'm questioning how things are going, or I just need extra support, or Anthony feels the same way, that we have somebody who is knowledgeable that can kind of be like a stepping stone of like, oh, why don't you try this at home? Or yes, on my experience, I recommend going to the hospital, that sort of thing. So you know even more detail about how that went because I was working with you.
And that was really fun. I love doing that with you. And there is something about having another woman who cares about what's going on with you that you could just bounce things off of and talk through things. That's really valuable. And I'm glad we were able to do that together.
Yeah, and I think that needs to be something that with care, it needs to be something that the woman is comfortable sharing all of the details. And so you're somebody who I could share without having to censor myself. And that's where you get the best care, is where you can be honest with somebody. And you were able to do that for me.
So now is it okay? I think we're to the point now where we can start to move into what this birth actually looked like. How did that unfold? And let's hear the actual birth story because it's a fun one.
Yeah, so I was all ready. I had like prepared all my postpartum stuff. I had my postpartum hemorrhage basket and my linen cubby and my like activities for my older children to do in the bed with me so that they could come up and enjoy the postpartum period with me. I had a projector set up in the bedroom. So I was ready to go. My spiritual like mental preparation from my third was like, it had been so recent. It just kind of really stuck with me, and I felt like I could prepare more for the postpartum period. And so I was just like really enjoying the end of my pregnancy. It was like middle of fall, and I would like go up to my room and fold baby laundry and watch a show and have time and drink my like electrolyte drink, and it was very enjoyable. And of course, it's something that is only possible because of my husband and his support. And my husband, I had been like dropping little bits of like, okay, this is what I need. This is what your role is. And I had like a note. I had a note card. These are your roles. And another note card. Here's our emergency contacts. Make sure you weigh the baby and like all this stuff. So we were ready, and I was coming up on my due date. And we were having dinner. I didn't like feel anything in particular. I didn't feel like extra tired. I didn't have bloody shower or anything like crazy. So, or anything that would like show me that labor was coming. And I had gone with my first to 41 weeks, and I knew that, I was okay going to 42 and that sort of thing. So we're just having dinner like the day or two before my estimated due date. And I told Anthony, why don't you let your boss know? It was a Sunday night. So I was like, why don't you call your boss in the morning and let him know that you're going to be at work after all. So I say that, and like as soon as I finish up that sentence, I hear my toddler slip down the stairs in the other room. So I rush to him and I squat down and I feel this pop and this gush and my water breaks. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I call Anthony, help, my water broke. And there was a ride at 6 o'clock, which is the earliest that we'll start the big boys' bedtime. And so he just claps his hands together and he's like, "All right, boys, time to go to bed." So they're like circling around me and like walking. Of course, I'm right at the bottom of the stairs, so they're like walking through my amniotic fluid up the stairs to go up the stairs. And my oldest son, who was 5, was he not even 5? Yeah, he had just turned 5 at the time. I had him go upstairs and get me a towel to stand on. So he was like my first labor helper, which is like really special, kind of full circle moment. And so I stood on this towel, and with the other 3, my water had broken in the middle of labor at some point, and it was just like one big gush, and it was over with. I didn't have to wear a pad or sit on a towel or anything. And with this one, it just kept coming and coming and coming. And I had suspected up until that point that I had polyhydramnios. I can't think of the layman's terms for that. That's like excess water, excess fluids. And so I just like kept gushing. And then every time I thought it would kind of slow down and I would step forward, like, you pick up your leg and now I'm like compressing my belly, I would get more water, more water coming out. So I stood there for like 45 minutes and then I thought, I'd rather just do this in the shower. And at this time, I wasn't getting any contractions. So I already, like, my first fear that was coming to me through this labor was, what if this goes for a day or 2 or 3 and the risks, and it's like not something I spent a lot of focus on preparing for because it's not something that happened with me before. So I was like, what if this goes a long time? What do I do? And I'm like, no, shut it down. Shut it down. Go take a shower. So finally I made it up. My water broke at 6, and then I made it up like 7:45. I finally made it to the shower. And I had lost so much water that I was able to shave my legs, and I just like took my time. Like I could kind of see my feet a little bit back, see my knees. And so I just like, I got all ready. I still wasn't having any contractions. I like washed my hair, shampooed, everything. Pamper myself, like, okay, this is gonna be my last shower for a little bit. And so I get out of the shower, and finally it was like, let's see, it was like an hour and a half. I can't remember exactly the timeline now. That I got a contraction, and it didn't hurt. It was just like a tightening. And I took that moment to like practice breathe, like remember how to breathe through. So I was all proud of myself, like, okay, I'm getting contractions, I'm breathing, like I'm getting cleaned up and everything. And at this point I had towel stations to stand. So I went into my bedroom towel station. I got some clothes on, like my giving birth clothes outfit that I had chosen, and brushed my hair and all this stuff. And I took my time up there, and then I went downstairs to my downstairs living room towel station. And my husband had put together a platter of foods and hydration and stuff, which is not something that you're allowed in the hospital, but I snuck it anyway because you need energy to give birth. So it felt nice to just freely eat and not have to like hide it from anybody or have it just be like a quick wrapper. Like I ate stuff that didn't come in wrappers, which was nice. Fruits and stuff. And we were watching The Voice. And then I was just kind of like started getting kind of sporadic contractions. And at some point, the overhead light and the sound of the TV show got like really sensory overwhelming for me. And so I kind of retreated into the next room, which was like darker and quieter. And I thought, oh, this could go on a long time. So I really thought my third birth was like a freak thing. And so I thought, this could go on a long time. Why don't I just like lay down as long as contractions aren't really like feeling intense or anything? So I laid down and I'm like texting people and just chilling. And there's a couple pictures of me there. And I get this contraction and it's so uncomfortable. I was like punching the wall and I could not wait for it to be over. And then a few minutes later, the same thing happened, and I couldn't move in the middle of the contraction, so I just felt stuck. And I'm like, please be over so I can get up. Be over. Like trying to surrender, and then also like, this sucks. Get me out of here. So it ends, and I get up so fast, and my husband comes over to me, and he's like, okay, he had the sense of like, okay, now it's time to be with her. So I was holding his hand and I was standing and we were swaying back and forth and he was rubbing my lower back, and it's not like a way that we had been like able to work together with either of my previous births, especially my third being in the car. He was like only driving. So he was able to like support me in that way because he had supported me through like birthing, but not through labor before. Um, so that was like a really special treat, and he just had this sense of like what I needed at the time. So we're swaying together, and then I just felt like I wanted to get that same position where I'm on my knees with my arms up on like a elevated surface. So I did that, and I'm like, okay, I need some water, and it was like, let's see, 10, maybe 10 or so. So my water, no, not 10. Yeah, my first contraction was like an hour before that. So we had been kind of doing this for like an hour until before they had actually started being like, okay, I need to really work through these. And so he got me a drink, but it didn't have a straw. So like, I need a straw, pull up my birth playlist, and now I'm like working through contractions on my own. Like, okay, maybe I should have pulled these up a little bit sooner. He pulls up my birth playlist, and finally I can sip my drink because he brought a straw. And the first song that came on was so annoying to me. I didn't even recognize it. I was like, I didn't put this song on here. Turn this song off. And he read the title of the song, and I'm like, well, I recognized it, and I'm like, well, turn it off anyway. I don't like the song. And it was like, just say Jesus or something, like nothing that was
Sure,
like,
sign you're in serious labor.
Just, like, was not the right
You're
song
like
for me.
annoyed by all the things.
Right, yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. So he skipped it, and like I didn't quite notice any other songs at that point. So he came over, and I'm like, at this point, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this much longer. Not like I can't do this, but I'm like, I don't want to do this much longer. And he actually said, like, you can do this. I'm like, I know I can, and I know I'm going to. I just don't want to. But still trying to like surrender my body, just like voicing it out there. I don't feel like doing this, but I'm going to, and I can. So, just like being mindful of what my wording is. And then I got to the point where I was like, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to like escape myself, and I was like kind of crawling around my hands and knees, like looking, but I didn't know what to go for. I was just like, didn't want to feel that feeling anymore. I just had this like intense cervix pressure. I didn't get the rectal contractions with this one, and I wonder if that has to do with just like feeling safer in a safer environment and not having any sort of fear there. Because I remember it being attached with fear with my first two, which is partly why I got the epidural. Like I felt like something was wrong because I had never heard of this before. So I didn't get the rectal contractions with this one. It was just like intense downward pressure just on my cervix. I'm like, man, it would be nice to have feelings elsewhere to kind of detract from that. And so I ended up crawling. I was like kind of my arms were elevated, and then I ended up crawling up so that I was just on hands and knees, and then I got tired of holding myself up. So I had my husband bring the birth ball, and I just kind of like leaned over the birth ball, and then it was like maybe a couple contractions, and I could feel like I started asking, can you feel him coming? Because I think I could feel him like the cervix opening up. And my whole thing throughout my labor was like, he doesn't actually have very far to go. If you measure from where the baby's head starts to where it ends,
I love that as a focus point. That's really a good one.
On to that. I hadn't read that before. I'm like, he really doesn't have very far to go. So once you feel him there, it's gonna be quick. Was kind of what I told myself. So, I felt like I felt like his head was coming up, but my husband said he couldn't hear it. He couldn't see, and I was like really confused at that moment. And then I had a couple more fetal ejection reflex, and I could feel at that point I was getting the ring of fire. But I was able to, once the ring of fire started, I was able to like grab hold and relax and stretch. I just told myself, relax, stretch, breathe. And then it would happen again, relax, stretch, breathe. And so his head was actually born over the course of 4 contractions. And so then his head was out, and I could feel like I didn't need to ask at this point. Like I could feel, okay, his head is out. And my husband during this time was like, push, 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 push. And it was just like reflex for him. And I'm like, I told you not to tell me when to push. And he's like, I'm sorry. But I didn't listen to him. It was funny that was kind of like what his reflex was. Like, what do? I gotta do something. Okay, tell her to push. And so the head was out. And then at this time, Anthony said again, I need you to push. And we had reviewed that he not to tell me what to push. But the way that he had said it, and like I knew that he understood why I didn't want him to tell me and that sort of thing. So I just felt like I needed to listen to him at that time. And so my contractions had stopped. Once the head was out, my contractions had stopped. And so I was like wiggling my hips back and forth, like maybe my uterus needs to touch the baby's foot or something, like something needs to be tweaked so that it like kicks back in to pushing again. So I wasn't getting the fetal ejection reflex, and I just like took a couple of contractions to kind of feel out my muscles, like what was going on, which is not something I got to do with any of my first three. And finally I found what I felt like were the right muscles, and I gave it one push and he just came right out. So I'm like on my hands and knees, and I just hear Anthony behind me. I was able to see where I was. We had hung up a clock that I could see from like anywhere downstairs, so we could see what time he was born without dealing with the phone or whatever. So I looked at the clock, and I could see where the hands were, but I couldn't interpret what time it was because of like labor brain. And Anthony was behind me, and I started hearing, come on, baby. And I didn't hear any crying at this time. He was just saying, come on, baby. And I was just being calm and just letting him do. I couldn't see what was happening, so I was just like letting him do his thing. And like we already knew kind of, he actually had been trained in neonatal like stimulation and resuscitation and such from where he had been deployed, one of his deployment locations. And so I was like, okay, the best thing I can do to help him is to just stay calm. So I looked at the time, I'm like trying to decipher the time, and then after a minute or so had passed, I was like, what color is the baby? And he said, he's blue. And I knew, okay, the baby's blue, and he's attached to my placenta, which is attached to me, and he's not like white and floppy, so I just told him, okay, blue is good. And then I said, he's a boy? Is the baby a boy? And he didn't say anything at first, but then I gave it a second. I asked him again, and he said yes. And so that's how I found out he was a boy, which was not what I had envisioned, because he was our first surprise gender. But then I started hearing this like raspy, like attack from behind me, and then we hear this big cry, and Anthony said, I see 11:20. And then I was able to like kind of do the math with my labor brain, like, okay, he was born at 11:18, which was like 2 hours after my first contraction. And so Anthony like helped me get my leg over. I was still had the cord like behind me attached, and so he helped me get my leg over and like lay on my back. And so I was like really uncomfortable laying that way. So I was like, okay, I hope I give birth to the placenta really soon, because I don't want to lay like this, but I feel like I can't move until the placenta is out. So I kind of just wiggled my belly, not like a full massage, but like wiggled it. Like if you're unattached, come on out, like shake it up a little bit. And then within 2 FER contractions, the placenta came out, and then we went through like cutting the cord and clamping it and like getting me cleaned up and comfortable and that sort of thing. So that was the birth. I can like share the immediate postpartum too, but that was how he was born. Like 2 hours, like late on a Monday night, just sleep upstairs. Didn't have to call anybody. Didn't have to coordinate with anybody. Didn't have to check in with anybody. I ended up not even calling you. Like I wouldn't have had time if I wanted to.
Yeah.
I just like didn't. Everything was going so smoothly that we just kind of did our thing, and like, wow, it almost felt like boring. Like I was expecting that same rush that I felt with my third, and this was like kind of boring.
Well, there was no adrenaline this time. The adrenaline piece was completely missing.
I know, that was the thing. Yeah. That was the missing
It was just
factor.
such an ordinary night at
sure.
home. Like one minute you're watching The Voice, and the next minute you're pushing out a baby, and just there. It's like birth is life. Birth is part of life.
Yeah, just like instead of watching a TV show, we push out a baby.
Oh my word. I love it. I am struck as I listen to you tell your story by how present, like how mentally present you seem to be. Like the way that you were able to kind of find certain phrases or thoughts to focus on in the most intense parts to keep yourself grounded and calm, both when you were pushing and then also when you were waiting for Anthony to finish working on baby so that he would breathe. It's like you had a truth that you could focus on that kept you from freak out mode, which is really beautiful.
I think that came down to not only the preparation, but also just not being in an environment where my whatever little thinking brain I was able to tap into was completely used up by dealing with other people. I was in a safe place where I was able to like safely switch between the parts of my brain, I guess, in those moments that I needed to, as my instinct allowed. And not have it be occupied by like dealing with everybody else. Because before, with my third, my thinking brain was like, okay, pretend you're holding your breath.
Oh yeah, that makes so much sense. You had so much leftover bandwidth because you weren't having to tend to all these other people in your space, and especially as a recovering people pleaser, it's so easy for other people's needs and energies to take up yours, and so it's really beautiful. You were even to be so present to the sensations in your body this time, like being able to feel him descend and just. Yeah, you were able to be present to your own birth.
And that's something that I had heard with home birth stories. Right, yes, that's such a good way. I had heard that with other home birth stories, and I'm like, how do you know? How do you feel that? And so I was able to feel, actually, after my water broke, I could feel, like, his toes. The definition of his digits inside me. And then, like, feeling him descend and, like, being able to have, like, control of the ring of fire and the fetal ejection reflex to an extent. That's a good point. That's definitely something that stands out with that I cherish.
Yeah, that's so neat. Well, in the little bit of time we have left, do tell us a little bit about your fourth trimester and anything you want to say about that.
Yeah. Wow. That has that's kind of evolved. Well, it started out as like I had done all this preparation, and my husband had like an understanding and appreciation of the fourth trimester and what a difference it makes when I rest compared to when I'm like trying to push myself to get back into housework and stuff too soon. It affects the whole family. It affects me. It affects me with the baby. It affects the baby. It affects him. It's just like every person and every relation, like combination of relationships within the house is affected by my healing. And that's something that we both came to believe and see for ourselves, especially with our third. And so that's something that he had like an appreciation and understanding with my fourth. And so he cooked me all the meals, and he like let me stay up in the room and sleep as much as I could, and like encouraged me just to rest and take it easy. And okay, like took all the big boys to church by himself. And it's actually kind of morphed into like from 3 months my baby developed full body eczema, and so we ended up like we still 6 months from that point switch staying up at night. As I like mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, it was my turn to sleep. I actually got to sleep last night, and so it's kind of turned into like this extended fourth trimester where he still cooks all my meals, he still makes sure that I sleep, and he still like makes sure that my baby and I are taken care of. The baby and I are taken care of, and we just kind of have like this new balance and this new lifestyle that has been entirely encouraged by our fourth baby, and like that transition of our family. Beautiful. And just that understanding of physiological birth and rest.
Yeah, and physiological fourth trimester, right? It's so neat that he is able to see that, the ripple effect of how this season goes for you and the baby, on the whole family and on your marriage, and can support you in that wholeheartedly and see his part in that, because it's the guy's part is so important. Like, I don't think dads know how important that their role is in fourth trimester. It's vital. Somebody has to mother the mother, and when a guy can figure out how to step into that and own that, it's beautiful to behold and good for everyone.
Yeah, especially kind of in our society as it is today, where we've lost the village and we don't have, like, it's not standard for the women of the town to come visit you and check in on you and stuff. And even so, our village happens to, like, live an hour away, the village that we have managed to create. So when he was able to, like, step into that role, and we have made sacrifices in our life to make that a priority, we've seen, like you said, the trickle effect toward everybody.
Well done, you guys. You already had such a cool partnership with him that shows up in your first 3 birth stories, and then it seems like this fourth birth gave you guys a chance to really see in, like, completeness and fullness the beauty of your partnership's potential to support and uplift and see you through the things that are intense and hard. And
some of that was experience, and some of that was all, and like experience and preparation and stuff, and then some of it was just like him seeing me birth in that way. He's just been in awe of, like, wow, this powerful woman that I'm married to has, like, taken it upon herself to birth in this way, and he's just, like, goes on all the time about how in awe he is of that. And so it's like he almost takes on this, like, I'm indebted to her because she's so awesome kind of. Not that I make him feel that way, but he's like, I'll do all the dishes from now on because you're so amazing.
That is so sweet. That's so sweet. I love it. Well, 2 things before we sign off here. One is, I would like people to know where they can find you, and I will put this information in the show notes too, of course, because I forgot to say this at the beginning, but Jalina offers a lot of different birth-related services, and so I want to make sure that those of you who are in the upstate New York area know about her. And then I'd also love if you have any, like, closing thought of just, like, I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you have, like, one brief piece of counsel you would give to a woman considering an out-of-hospital birth for the first time, what might you like her to know?
For me, I had read this to somebody else, and this has been easy for me, not easy, but easier probably to come to, having dealt with infertility and, like, all the miscarriage. All in all, we've had 6 miscarriages, and we've had either 1 or 3 before each of our boys. And so what really stuck out to me is, like, when you find peace in the worst possible outcome being, like, both mom and baby succumb to birth. When you make peace with that and you have an understanding of, like, there's only so much you can do to prevent that, and you don't have a fear of that, but an understanding of that, and also as a Christ follower, knowing that you are, like, in the presence of the Father, and that you are no longer suffering, and that if that were to happen, like, you don't care. Ultimately, once you get to that place where it's, like, something that you have peace with and that you don't fear, is when you can say that you're ready to free birth.
Wow. Yeah. Yes. That's good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And then do you want to tell people the name of your birth business? And then we'll put the details of how to get to you there in the show notes. But.
Yes. So I started up just inspired by kind of my history, my personal and my professional history, and then working with Brooke and having unmedicated birth and free birth and everything. It all just kind of came together into, now I've created all around doula and photography services. So I do, at the moment, I specialize in postpartum and bereavement doula, which is a role that I've played several times over the past few years, being in the bereavement community, and then also having friends like having babies and stuff. And then I also have done photography, and so I'm adding that in as now I'm getting into birth photography. And so anyone who's like in the far northeast corner, like right in the corner of Vermont, Canada, or even in Vermont, I serve like that whole region, like around Lake Champlain, with birth photography and postpartum and bereavement services. I'm at allaroundbirth.com, my website, that's my website, and that's where you find both my free birth story and Judah's police chase birth story. That's my third. And I'm on social media at allaroundbirth. And then I have, if anyone wants to look into like my recurrent miscarriage stuff, that's actually on my old Instagram, this side of if. So I go through in detail, going through recurrent miscarriage and then pregnancy and parenting afterward.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, you have so many wise and wonderful reflections on your stories and on your process. And I know that this will be a real gift to the women who hear it. So thank you again for being here and sharing so generously.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. All right. We'll see ya. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you'll be back and join us every week for each new episode. Please be sure to subscribe and share, get the word out there.